All right, thank you. Thank you for coming out, and thanks for those watching online. Happy to be here. I want to talk tonight about money and relationships, a rather tricky issue. And I think there's a fundamental ambiguity in a lot of romantic relationships, which is this question: should all money possessed by romantic partners be considered our money? And I don't think it's always obvious what the answer to that should be. So let me give you an illustration from Curb Your Enthusiasm, which I think nicely captures this. So this is a couple's dinner between Larry and Cheryl and Stu and Susan. And Stu picks up the check for the entire table. And Larry says, "Oh, thanks, Stu. That was nice." But then Susan notes that, well, he's using our money to pay for us. You can thank both of us. And so Larry says, "Well, you can call it our money, but just for the sake of discussion, he's the one who goes to work and earns the money. You don't work." And she says, "Well, it's not about where it's coming from." And he says, "No, it's completely about where it's coming from. That's what it's about. Where does it come from?" And so, yeah, even though this is kind of a fictional situation, I think it captures something very common and real. And this kind of scorekeeping, like where does it come from, is very bad for kind of serious romantic relationships, and it's very easy to kind of slip into this trap of scorekeeping. And so many relationships start out with what you might call a communal orientation between spouses and eventually become exchange-oriented. So a communal relationship is where partners help each other when they need help. They're not necessarily prepaying for favors. You might say, can you do the dishes tonight? I'm so exhausted, I can't do them. I'm asking for help because I need it. In an exchange relationship, it's more about kind of scorekeeping. Can you do the dishes tonight? I did them last night, it's your turn. And that is where it gets into not so good territory. And it's very easy for couples to slide into that kind of scorekeeping orientation. And so it's best to kind of stave that off as long as possible, if at all possible. And some of our research and prior theory suggests that one way to keep it communal and get rid of scorekeeping is to use a joint account, take your money and my money and turn it into our money, forget as much as possible about where it comes from, try to kind of hide income differences and kind of get rid of the labels. It's all ours. We don't need to scorekeep if at all possible. So we do find that helps keep the relationship communal. Partners who adopt this account structure report more communal behaviors. They're happier than people who have things entirely separate. But for better or worse, there's a lot of transparency that comes with sharing a joint account. You can imagine that can be good or bad. If I can see every dollar you're spending, that's not necessarily a real fun situation. So this can create some tension, especially when a tightwad is paired with a spendthrift. And let me tell you what I mean by those terms. So I think the tightwad perspective is well captured. Again, I'm turning to fiction here, but the story Love in the Time of Cholera, there's a character, Uncle Leo, who grew up very poor and became this kind of rich industrialist, very successful. Someone accused him of being rich. And he said, no, I'm not rich. I am a poor man with money, which is not the same thing. That is very much the tightwad mentality, that no matter how good I might look on paper, I feel like I'm always just kind of a expenditure or two from being ruined, being bankrupt. And that is very much the tightwad mindset. So what tightwads seem to do is develop a pain when it comes to spending money, a distress, and it's kind of protected. It protects them. It helps them kind of not go overboard with spending money. But it doesn't go away easily when circumstances improve. Like, it might be a good thing to develop a pain of paying if you have very little money to spend, but when you do have money to spend, hopefully spending would be less painful. But it's a very well-learned response. It's hard to shake off. I like this quote from Mona Shalabi. She's a data journalist and very much seems to be a tightwad. She notes that What I have is what you could call money dysmorphia. I feel like I do not have money even though I do. I know objectively that I can go out to lunch, order a $17 burger, and have plenty of money left over. But still, I'll sit at the table stewing with anxiety over what I might need that money for someday. My warped reality comes from fears about the future, one where I might be back in a dingy bedsit, unable to pay bills, or even worse, relying on a man. So she started off in life with very limited financial resources, had a very successful career, but really just couldn't enjoy the new money that was coming in. The spendthrift perspective is quite different. I'll quote someone from my favorite podcast, Ask Rana. It's an advice podcast. And the character Rana, her perspective is, I'd rather be looking at it than looking for it. And that's what spendthrifts like me, that's the way we shop. We don't shop only for needs that we obviously have. We also shop for like potential needs or things we might need someday down the road. And so we have spendthrifts who will say things like this. This is a 34-year-old software engineer. And she noted that I bought a really expensive cashmere jacket from Max Mara. I purchased it because it looks really nice. I like the color and the soft feel. I ultimately decided to purchase it because I feel one day when I need a formal suit for an interview or a presentation, I can use it. I regret buying it because I don't find it useful to me in the near future. And also it doesn't look good or doesn't look that great on me for that price. So this is a very spendthrift phenomenon. Maybe I'll buy the coffee, the nice coffee thermos, so I'll make my own coffee and stop going to Starbucks every day. I'll buy the gym membership so it'll prompt me to go to the gym. So it's just kind of buying in hopes that something will change, or buying just in case you need it. It's a very different approach. My favorite spendthrift is Sammy Davis Jr. For my book, I got to read Yes, I Can, his award-winning autobiography. It is wonderful, and it's just tales of being a spendthrift, relentless spendthrift behavior. There's one story where his friend, Will Maston, kind of confronted him, saying, "You're spending like crazy. You have to stop. You have a spending problem." And he said, no, you're the one with the spending problem. He says, look at that suit you're wearing. It's the same one you wore 4 years ago. And you're still living in the cheapest room you can get at the America, right? We're making $5,000 a week. And what have you got to show for it? A bank book? The money has never been my payoff for a week's work. Never. When we were starving from one town to another, I wasn't thinking, someday I'll have a pile of money. I was thinking someday we'll make it and I'll live like a human being. I'll go where I want to go and I'll be able to do anything I want to do. It wasn't about building savings that he might enjoy someday. It was about living a life. He wasn't looking to stockpile money. Now, he went a little overboard. If you know Sammy's story, it kind of got a little out of hand. But he is very much my spendthrift muse and very much embodies that approach. So we developed a scale to measure tightwad spendthrift tendencies. You can score between 4 and 26. If you're so inclined, feel free to scan the code to take the scale. But we separate people into these 3 categories: tightwad, spendthrift, and the people in the middle we call unconflicted consumers. They get a less exciting name because they are, they're happy. They're kind of at peace with what they're spending. They don't experience a lot of conflict like the tightwads and spendthrifts. This is from a sample of 10,000 plus New York Times readers. You can see there's a lot of tightwads there. Spendthrifts tend to get all the attention, like people blaming them. Oh, stop spending so much. Don't buy the avocado toast, and you can kind of get the house of your dreams. But there's a lot of tightwads running around. And across all the different surveys we've done, they're about a similar number of tightwads and spendthrifts, around 25% each in like our combined data. So, you might have some curiosities about these 2 types. You might wonder, well, do tightwads spend conservatively because they love saving? In general, no, that doesn't seem to be what's happening. People who are frugal love to save. Tightwads really just hate to spend. They might have a big stack of money that they've accumulated, not because they love reusing everything and they just believe in saving. They just can't bear to spend the money. Do tightwads just not have money to spend? Well, we certainly don't see that when it comes to current income. Current income is not a good predictor of whether you're a tightwad or a spendthrift. And also, tightwads look pretty good on paper, on average. They have more savings, less debt. It's not because now they don't have money to spend. Maybe it used to be, but not now. Are spendthrifts just what you might call materialistic? Well, the research shows that materialism is about like signaling status, getting the fancy watch and the car to kind of show off to your friends and neighbors that you have the money to spend and you have good taste. That doesn't seem to be a signature motivation for spendthrifts. They just have a lower bar for purchases. Just anything that kind of catches their attention. Yeah, I'll try it. It's not so much about like showing off. Now, although I have a lot of love for tightwads and spendthrifts, and I think they're quite charming and wonderful, on average, there is some conflict that comes with being a tightwad or a spendthrift. When we ask people, kind of how satisfied are you with your tightwad spendthrift status, we get this kind of inverted U shape where it's the people at the extremes who are least satisfied. There's some conflict there. They know they're not quite doing it right. And that's a very interesting characteristic that they carry around. And as I was approaching marriage to a tightwad in the audience, and I was wondering, like, are there relationship implications to this? Because normally, birds of a feather flock together. Republicans marry Republicans, Democrats marry Democrats on average. But, if there's something we don't like about ourselves, we tend not to seek it out. When we see someone else who has our problem, it's like this really uncomfortable mirror kind of shining a light on, what it is we're self-conscious about, and it can be kind of a turnoff. And so we thought that this might be a rare instance in which the opposites kind of hit it off at first and really kind of enjoy each other's company and really get along. And indeed, we do find that there is this kind of notable tendency for tightwads and spendthrifts to marry one another. If you look at kind of marriages involving just the extremes, you're more likely to see a mismatched marriage, one tightwad, one spendthrift, than a matched marriage, two tightwads or two spendthrifts. And we think that can be kind of fun and interesting at first. But there are lots of things that are fun and interesting at first that, as you go into a longer term relationship, it can really start to kind of irritate you as, you start facing different decisions and context. So in terms of what these relationships look like, I'd say tightwads win a lot of battles, spendthrifts win the wars. So what that means is that if we disagree about how much to spend, tightwads win a lot of those battles. They might say no, 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 no. But no is not like some permanent answer. No is just kind of, well, we can revisit this later. And so the spendthrift might persist and keep asking, and eventually the tightwad might say, fine, I'm tired of talking about this, buy it. So once the money's spent, the spendthrift is won, and it's over. You can't get that money back. So if you have a mismatched couple, they look a lot like two spendthrifts rather than two tightwads. You just need one spendthrift in the house to really tilt the entire house into a spendthrift direction. Mismatched couples argue the most over money. They have lower relationship satisfaction on average. Marriages between two tightwads are the least volatile, but they're also, on average, kind of least adventurous in terms of going out and experiencing new things and taking risk and doing the fabulous vacation. So there are costs and benefits everywhere. I think the mismatched couples actually have the greatest potential for happiness. I would hope Julie would agree, but you have to do it right. You have to be kind of mindful about it. But left to their own devices, this is the typical pattern where the opposites really argue a lot with each other. So the question becomes, what can couples, especially if they're mismatched, do to reduce friction and increase relationship satisfaction? So I talked a moment ago about, a joint account is a great thing. All incoming money gets laundered through a joint account. We take away the labels of your money and my money. It's all our money. However, we don't necessarily only want to use a joint account. Hopefully, on the back end, there are separate accounts attached to the joint account so that we each get to spend some of our money without close monitoring by the other person, without the other person kind of looking over our shoulder. In general, you might have a sense of what your partner is spending per week or per month, but the line-by-line details, I think, lead to kind of more harm than good, usually. I'm assuming we're talking about like a trusting, generally well-functioning relationship. This is what I would recommend. I think Catherine Babb Mugera has the right idea. Another author, she has this really fun book about Poe for your problems. Kind of Poe is like a self-help, unintentional self-help person. But she notes that in her relationship, that she and her husband, we both work and we both earn decent salaries, which get direct deposited into our shared checking account. We've granted each other $500 a month to spend however we want, no questions asked. And this is how we're still married. The reason we had to institute an allowance system was because I cannot be questioned about buying Jaws t-shirts or sneakers or the occasional out-of-print biography going for $55 used on Amazon. I have to feel that I am independent or I cannot be married as much as I love Chris. So I think that's basically the right approach. I don't know if we need to think of it as an allowance, but I think that basic kind of, flow of money within the house is kind of psychologically pretty good. And yeah, it's good to avoid transaction by transaction scrutiny. Otherwise, you do get into a lot of bickering over small, inconsequential purchases. A lot of people have been convinced by kind of financial gurus who say like, well, what's your latte factor? If you could just avoid buying the lattes, you could reach kind of fabulous savings, and anyone can become rich if you just stop buying lattes or muffins or whatever your little treat is. And the math doesn't add up. But people have become convinced. And so they will argue. You will see people with tons of money arguing over the silliest, tiniest things that do not matter. And so it is best to just kind of hide those details, make them available upon request, and hopefully there are not too many requests. And if we have different hobbies or interests, I won't have the expertise or context to properly interpret your spending. So you can really kind of squash someone's joy of their kind of individual pursuits when you're like, oh my gosh, you spent that much on that thing. And so like someone might spend $1,000 on this card and that might seem wild to the other person. This is a $4,000 card. That would be an amazing purchase. But to a non-expert, this would be like a piece of cardboard. That's ridiculous. So as long as you just kind of know in general what people are spending, it's best to kind of avoid the details, I think. And so, there's a lot of talk about how transparency is best within relationships, especially financial transparency. That's just personal finance 101. Everyone preaches financial transparency. I say I am for financial translucency, where you have a sense of what people are doing, but you're not seeing the exact details. I think that is the key to balancing financial and psychological well-being. Just a couple of final points here about some other tips on navigating these differences. So if partners disagree about how much to spend on a material item, so if we're arguing about whether or not to buy the smart fridge or the new Lexus or, a nice piece of art. I think the advice would be generally let the partner who is more of a tightwad go with what they want to do. Just because the research is clear that a lot of physical material goods, they don't bring a lot of lasting happiness. Like, I love having a good furnace. Like, there are some material things that you need, but a lot of like fun material things, just we get used to them and they don't bring a lot of lasting happiness. So let the tightwad win on those. But if we disagree about how much to spend on an experience, particularly a shared experience between a couple or a family, you need that. You need the novelty and the adventure. And here I say let the partner who is more of a spendthrift win. And maybe the spendthrift they plan it. Don't even tell the tightwad what the hotel cost. Tell them you got a special or something. But you need these things because it's not just the experience, it's the anticipation, it's the memories, the stories. You can also learn a lot about other people in your family. You might think, well, I've known them for 30 years. What more do I need to learn? No, you can learn when you do novel things, more so than just when you're doing the day-to-day stuff. So I think I'll pause there and open it up if there are any questions or curiosities. And thank you again for coming out. Thanks for watching online. And all right, thank you. Charlie, he wanted to come sit on stage for this part, so we're going to.
And again, we would ask that if you have questions, we'll pass you the mic so you can be heard onto the video stream and then recorded into that with your question.
I'm not sure I like the term tightwad, so I will say frugal, because this morning I did wash out some baggies to reuse them, but they were the heavyweight Ziploc bags, and they only had potato chips in them, so it's just crumbs and salt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So,
well,
I'm on the spectrum, though.
Yes.
I'm on the spectrum. Okay. So, when I was in college, they started having designer clothes. Well, maybe they always had designer clothes, but they had designer clothes that they were marketing to the regular people. So they started having designer shoes, designer jeans, designer jackets, all of this stuff. And I couldn't afford it. I was in college. I could barely afford college. Couldn't afford it. But I always dreamed that I would get those things. When I finally had the money, I found out I didn't want those things anymore. So maybe people change a little bit. So there are some fancy things that I have now, but in terms of just everyday things, I no longer desire the designer stuff. I think I outgrew that.
Yeah.
But I started off because I couldn't afford it.
Yes. I'm hearing a lot of frugality in your answer, and that's great. Frugal people are happy. I'm a lot happier than like a pure tightwad. So I'm feeling optimistic here. And, yes, desires do fade, and that is why one of the pieces of advice, particularly for spendthrifts, is like things like Amazon wish list. Just sleep on it. Don't put it in your cart, put it in your wish list and revisit it tomorrow or next week. And oftentimes it will subside on its own. And so, anything you can do to, that's like the old time advice, like put your card in water and then freeze it. And so you have to wait for the card to thaw. And it's just like instituting a waiting period. Yes. But, I hear a lot of frugality. That's a good thing.
I was wondering if you noticed any trends for the younger generations, more toward one situation or another. Gen Z, millennials. I don't know. He's a lot younger than I am, and also are most people a mixture of these two? I guess that's another question.
Yeah. No. I would say around 50% of people we've surveyed are just very clearly in a middle ground of like unconflicted. Maybe they have moments of tightwadism, moments of being a spendthrift, and I'm happy for them. That's like a great place to be. We do find some age differences. I think they're generational, where older people are on average more tightwad than younger generations. But I will say that we have followed people over time. We've even followed kids over time, and it's just a remarkably stable thing. And I think you don't find a lot of like wild fluctuations over time. And I think that's what makes it hard for some tightwads. When they actually do come into money, they can't loosen up. Even when they spend like on the corporate credit card, they can't loosen up. There's like expense account tightwads out there, and it's just hard to turn these well-learned responses off. But yeah, so there's some generational differences for sure, but we don't see a lot of wild fluctuation. I will say in like a good relationship, one good sign of a good relationship is the partners become more like each other. They don't become exactly, but they like, help each other come to the middle.
So I'm thinking if we compare spending money on ourselves and spending money on others, like our loved ones or the relationship, would people change their type? Like for example, I am a tightwad for myself, but when it comes to maybe my boyfriend and our like trip together, our experience together, I might be a spendthrift. So I think maybe more people is the opposite. Maybe they're more willing to spend money on themselves and is more tightwad to others.
Yeah, it can go both ways. I do hear a lot of tightwads report that it is easier to spend on close others than on themselves. So it may be less painful when you get the excitement of maybe it's just more pure shopping for someone else, and you're not so caught up in the price of it. But I will say some of it might just be it's mandatory to buy a lot of gifts. And so like, yes, tightwad spendthrift differences are lower for things like gifts, but some of that is just like, well, if I don't get this gift, this is going to be a real problem in this relationship. So some of it's that, but yeah, some of it is easier and kind of more joyful to shop for others. We do hear that a lot. Yeah.
Hi, Professor. I am curious, as someone who has ADHD, a lot of what you were sharing about spendthrifts, I was like, you were in my brain right now, and this is uncomfortable. I'm curious if in your research you found any overlap between things like ADHD and being a spendthrift or a tightwad, or any other overlaps, I think, with neurodiversity.
That's a great question. I probably have some of that in some open-ended responses, but I haven't specifically looked into that. But that feels very right. And now it is on my list. I love that question. That feels right. So I will look into that. Thank you. That's great.
I think I also take into account time. So my sister does something, is it Gas Buddy? Anyhow, she'll text me and say, this part of Detroit has gas for this amount. It's like, I don't care. The time it would take me to get that to that station, wait in whatever line, it's not worth it. And I just arbitrarily pick whatever amount of money and say, this is my hourly rate. And if the amount of time it takes me to get that sale doesn't match up to my hourly rate, then it's not a sale. It's not a benefit. And sometimes I will spend more just to get it done and not keep coming back to the store or not having to wait in line. And also I wanted to comment on what you said. I'm very cheap except for when it comes to my cat. So this cat that I got for $25 has cost me millions. This cat has been at MSU Small Animal Hospital 3 times, the Kalamazoo Urgent Care twice. In any case, I go to Plum Market and I buy the cat teriyaki salmon that's $15. And don't use my real name, thank you.
I love that. I mean, I hope the cat's getting better and doing well. And your comments remind me a lot of Tightwad behavior. I think is kind of penny wise and pound foolish, where they will. It is a lot about kind of the sticker price, and they are kind of not protective of their time and well-being enough, and they'll put up with shoes that irritate them every single day, but they're waiting on a sale to buy new ones. And, I read some of these stories and it's just like, can I come talk to you for a half hour and let's get this done? Like, there's just like needless suffering for just like, for what, the sticker price might be. Yeah. Hey. You'll be next try.
Hi, this is all very interesting. I think I'm also in the middle and easier to spend on other people than myself. A lot of thoughts lingering. This might fall in the category of, it's in my open-ended question data and haven't explored it, but do you have any anecdotes or insights about general decision-making anxiety or angst that's attached separate from spending? Like, did you see any trends or hear feedback from people that this is not just about money or like small, large decisions, or where people spoke to you on that?
Yes. No, I think the data would suggest that Tightwads are more of a maximizer type. They are more mathematically minded. They would take longer to kind of think through consequences and alternatives and a lot of counterfactual thinking. Whereas spendthrifts, I think, are more able to make kind of quick decisions for better or worse. But I would think, Tightwads are like too deliberative, I would say, too kind of ruminating and reflecting, and they are very prone to that. Yes, which again sometimes helps, sometimes not so much. Yeah. Sure. Do you have a question? Yes. Please.
Your favorite spendthrift, do you know what kind of job he had to get like a certain amount of money?
Oh, well, he was a very famous entertainer, and we'll watch some of his YouTubes later. But yeah, he was a real legend, especially in Las Vegas.
What kind of videos did he make?
Well, we'll watch him.
Okay.
Yeah, no, he was just like a singer, dancer, comedian, everything. He's wonderful. Yeah.
So that does bring up a question about celebrities who make it big, whether they're singers, musicians, athletes. You hear about them buying fancy cars and houses, and that showed MTV Cribs, although I think some of that was fake. But you hear about people who make it big and spend all their money and they're broke in 10 years.
I think, in the book I talk about kind of, shows that, like comedies where a family is once rich and then they lose everything. And those stories do stick with people. Like it's, obviously there's suffering for the people who go through it, but there are kind of lessons and that can leave a mark on people who see it happen. But yeah, I think, Tightwads, they're often waiting for the other shoe to drop, and sometimes it does drop. And they might be thankful they were so cautious. But for a lot of them, it seems like it's a lot of unnecessary, spinning of wheels. But yeah, it can happen.
You mentioned that you would recommend tightwads take the lead when people disagree about the price of things and spendthrifts on experiences. Are there any exceptions for things where spendthrifts actually do come through?
Well, if it's a good that facilitates a lot of experiences, like I might want to let the spendthrift decide about the furnace, or something where it's good to invest. And if I'm running a business, I definitely want a spendthrift perspective in the room. I want a tightwad too. I want the rivals, but you need to spend money to make money often, and so there might be some more investment-like goods where maybe you listen a little more to the spendthrifts. But yeah, if it's just like things on a whim, like, oh, wouldn't that be fun? That's tightwad territory. Yeah. Abby?
Thank you. So what do you recommend for married couples or couples who argue about money? Probably like consistently. And I think we're in the middle, both of us in a way, but I probably come from more of a tightwad family and my husband from more of a spendthrift family, but just overly communicating about it. And like, I liked what you said about not looking at every item. But it's so hard. I feel like
it's so hard.
Everyone's so busy and there's so much spending all the time, especially with kids. So.
Yeah. To me, it's about communicating about the right stuff. Like, there are conversations that are good to have about big picture decisions. And, there's a lot of talk nowadays about money dates, and if you can combine a money date with something fun, kind of like Mary Poppins' approach, the sugar to help the medicine go down. So, like, pair it with like a nice dinner or something fun, a fun movie. But yeah, talk about the big things, and to the extent possible, don't talk about the little things. So it's funny, like when the publisher was writing the promotional stuff, they were like, oh, this book it's all about open communication. I was like, well, hold on. Not completely open. It's open about the important stuff, but it's kind of closed about, like, it's okay. I'm talking metaphorically, but spouses can have diaries. Like, you can have a private interior life that is not fully known by your partner, and I think spending money can be part of that. And take an afternoon and look at your account structures, and that itself can put you in a position where you're seeing things you don't want to see, and can you route the money differently.
I'm just curious, I liked your Amazon wish list anecdote. Do you have a favorite tip for like the tightwad side of how to move through something they might be toiling over? Yeah.
Well, not in the moment, like the spendthrifts. There are things spendthrifts can do in the moment to diffuse the desire. But tightwads, you kind of have to pre-commit. And I like to say, we think about budgeting as restricting spending, but tightwads need budgets to spend. And you have to earmark kind of fun or optional or some spur-of-the-moment money, set it aside in advance so it's there waiting for you when the opportunity arises. Because tightwads cannot justify it in the moment. But if they can know themselves and plan ahead and earmark a little loose money, fun money on the side, and especially the earlier you can do that, the better, because you'll start to get used to that money being there, and that's what it's for. So you hear tightwads telling stories like, I had to make a plan of spending X per month on things I would never consider buying before. I forced myself to. So budgeting, it can work both ways as a good pre-commitment device for both extremes. Yeah.
I think money can be interesting when people are dating, because if somebody makes a grand gesture, and then the other person who's the tightwad goes, "You did what?" It takes on way more than just the money.
Yeah. No, I mean, nowadays, you hear stories about like love bombing, where people kind of give you too much, and it really puts you in an uncomfortable spot. Like, I've known you 2 weeks. I don't feel ready for this. But, in terms of more manageable, like, gestures, I think at first it can be quite fun and, like, charming. Like, I would never do that. That's so, wow. But I think as you go along and you have other needs and expenses coming up, there's a recent Saturday Night Live sketch where they do like the commercial where he buys her a new car for Christmas and puts a bow on it. And she's like, wants a divorce. Like, she can't stand it. It's like so wild. And so, yeah, there are a lot of things that work at first that don't hold up over time. So, like a shy person being with an extrovert at first, it can be like, oh, this is a whole new world. But eventually the shy person will need their quiet time, and it becomes too much. And sometimes the very thing that draws us in can kind of push us away later. They call it fatal attraction. Yeah.
I wonder if there's a cultural twist to this. Like, if you grow up in a family or a neighborhood where everybody gets half-price bakery items, or everybody makes off-brand Kool-Aid, or everybody goes to the thrift store, then that's the culture you're brought up in. So you don't even know it's different from what other people are doing.
Yeah. No, I have some quotes in the book about kind of some people who grew up in that setting, and they look good on paper now, and they hear like a beeping outside, and they were used to that being the sound of a car being repossessed. And they too are kind of living on the edge and waiting for something terrible to happen. And so, yeah, I would suspect in those cases it gets even harder to shake it off if the numbers change later.
But doesn't everyone, like, hand-me-down clothes from your sisters or your cousins? Doesn't everybody do that? I don't know.
Yeah. And that's, not necessarily a bad thing at all. And it just, I think, if you're kind of one extreme or the other, and you're growing up around people who behave very differently, then it could start to really irritate you or just make you feel weird. That's what happened to me. I was a spendthrift growing up around a lot of tightwads, and that's how I became curious in all this. And I noticed it, the difference.
So, like, if you see it like a baseball card box, for example, it's like $25, and another, like, single card is $25. Let's say the box is good, but you don't know what's in it, and, like, you buy so much of it that you can't move around your house, and you have to, like, sell some of them. Like, what will you spend that money on that you get back from the cards?
Well, I would say a lot of people in that situation don't sell it, and they just kind of live with the restricted space. That's called hoarding behavior, and it's very hard to you need an intervention. You need someone to come in and help you go through that. But hopefully we don't get there. We collect cards also, but I don't think we're there yet.
So I remember the definition of Taiwan's is spending money can cause pain. So I'm wondering, so for spendthrift, is causing money cause less pain or bring pleasure?
No, I mean, spendthrifts often find shopping kind of exciting, but I think the key feature is basically somebody cut the brakes. They just don't have the stop mechanism. They don't. They might realize what I'm considering buying it's okay. It might be fun, but there's nothing on the other side to stop them. So it just has to clear some low threshold, and they're like, yeah, I'll try it. So yeah, it's and they might know, like, I'm going to regret this later, but spendthrifts are more present oriented. things that happen later, what do I care about later? This is now. Yeah.
So it sounds like more driven by the
I don't think so. I don't think that's the key difference. I think the key difference is how much distress they feel, how much they think about opportunity cost, what am I giving up later. That is just not as present in them, it seems. Yeah.
I like the idea of money dates. That I don't think I'm very familiar with that. And I am the spendthrift. I'm married to a tightwad. What would you recommend for those money dates? Are there questions that you'd recommend are worth asking to prevent some of the fights that are inevitable?
Yeah. Yeah, you might want to pre-plan some larger topics. Let's focus on our retirement today, or the house remodel decision tomorrow, or becoming the owners of wonderful Book Suite. Everyone go to Book Suite. We have our owner here in the crowd. But yeah, no, it's better that than what you don't want to do is like, oh, let's print out everything and kind of comb over details in a free form exploration and see what we stumble upon, because that's going to lead to a lot of finger pointing. But if you can like plan a topic where, there are some numbers involved, but it's just like, we're going to focus on one or two decisions, I think that's a good date.
What do you think about like friends judging spending habits of each other, and like social media? Obviously, everyone's looking at all these seemingly amazing things people are doing and buying things like that. How to combat that?
Well, it's a favorite pastime of mine, certainly, judging other spending. But no, there's no getting around it. And there's just, to me, there's just inherent mystery of, well, you have this thing, how'd you get it? You pay cash? Are you kind of stretching yourself thin with credit? Or you don't know. Do you inherit something? And there's just this fundamental, for me, I don't really know what to read into this, but I do like to look and imagine.
There was a time where I was saving for my 20% down payment on a house. So I put myself on a budget, and it's like, don't eat out, or whatever minimum I set for myself. But no movies, because that was too expensive. So I started going through the Ann Arbor Observer and some other newspapers for free or almost free events. And actually, that was like some of the best 2 years of my life, because there were book signings, book readings, poetry slams. I could go to University Musical Society to Hill Auditorium, and usually about the time the show starts, someone would just hand me a ticket, and I'd say, how much? And they're like, so-and-so couldn't show up. We already paid for it. Here you go. Sporting events. If you're not going to football or basketball or hockey, there's a lot of sporting events that are free or almost free, like watching tennis, going to the parks, actually going to the gym, because I did calculate. If I went to the gym 5 times a week, it was a social outing, but a year-long pass was worth it. But I really thought about what I wanted to do, and there was actually a lot of things in Ann Arbor that you could do for free or almost free. And I joined folk dancing groups, book clubs, and I didn't buy the book, I just read the book. My secret was to go to Borders and read like a chapter a day. But later, when I had money, I went by and actually bought books. But for those 2 years, and it was before Kindle and all that fancy stuff, I would go to the library or to the bookstore, and I would read, and I just was focused on getting that down payment. Once I bought the house, then I started spending money again. But it made me appreciate how much you could do in a place like Ann Arbor that was free or almost free. There were student productions. There was just the museum. There was just so much going on, and I really appreciated all the things that I found that I could do for free.
I think we are very lucky to live in a place like this, and I don't think a lot of people realize, just with a little homework, all the fun, free things that are out there. It's a good reminder.
And the galleries, the art galleries, when they have food, they would have like little food and a little this much wine. Hey,
Just
just
enough.
change your shirt and go back. It works.
Hi. I was wondering in your work if you've found any demographic or even regional kind of association of folks, higher proportion being tightwads versus spendthrifts, and certainly implications for marketing.
Yeah. Well, so we do find some demographic differences. We talked about the generational differences. Women are a little more likely to report being spendthrifts. It's always a small effect, but it's always there. We are, as of this afternoon, launching a state-by-state survey. I want to put out a map by election day of like where the tightwads are concentrated, and there's different things. Is it higher education states or lower income? It could be anything, and so we're very much interested in that. We've looked at other things like Big Five, like how conscientious are you, or otherwise self-controlled. In terms of marketers, everything's geared to help tightwads loosen up. Even like the pain of paying, you want to take away attention from the money leaving your possession. So what do? Well, you open an Amazon Go store where you just have to scan your app and you just walk out with your items. There's no checkout. Or if you're at the gas pump, you want to put a big blaring dumb video, distracting you from the money, how much you're spending on gas. So it's all about attention management. That's out there to help tightwads, but spendthrifts are really kind of on their own if they want to. Nothing's out there to help them kind of slow down. So they really have to take it upon themselves to, pay in cash when possible, delete your credit card information from Amazon, collect receipts and go home and put it in Excel how much you're spending. And so it's a very spendthrift-friendly environment. Trying to turn everyone into spendthrifts. Marketers are good at that.
Well, I want to tell something.
Yeah.
I might not be here tomorrow. Hello.
Hello.
My landlord increased my rent 33%. So, I did not renew my lease, and I moved into my camper. And I have lived in my camper for 3 years and 4 months. And it's only 16 feet long, and it's tough to do. But somehow I am managing, because my goal was to secure, protect, and hold my equity. The IRS declares that if I have a mortgage or a lien on my camper, and I live in my camper, and it has one kitchen, it has a kitchen, a bed, and a bathroom. So is there creativity allowed there? Of course. So pitch the tent and take care of business. They have bathrooms you can buy, pitched like tents. So maybe I have suffered from commentary because I park all over the place at nighttime. And I drive on the roads every day, almost. Sometimes I take the bus because someone's kind to let me park there while I run all over the place. I take guff. At first it was, where do you dump your refuge? Then it was, you don't pay taxes. And then it was, go west. Or then it was, go east. But just, where are you going from here? So recently I have scolded people for asking me questions. And some take off running with their tail between their legs, or some think. But I do give them guff back. So what I'm trying to say is, no matter what you do to save your whatever is important to you, money for a home, equity, and I just walked in a few minutes ago, so I missed a lot. Whatever you decide to do, it is the right thing because you'll make it happen.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your experience. Thank you. And yeah, I think it speaks to the power of goal-driven behavior. And I wish you nothing but the best. Thank you. And thanks to everyone. I appreciate this. Thank you.
And once again, thank you for coming to this presentation at your Ann Arbor District Library. We couldn't do all this without you, and we appreciate you again coming out here. Did want to say that our friends from Book Suite do have a table out front, so if you would like a copy of Scott Rick's book, you are welcome to do that. Now, again, if you do want to be a little bit more spendthrifty there, we also do have, there's that option, but for those of you who are more tightwads, we do have copies of the book in the library. You are welcome to check them out with your Ann Arbor District Library membership. So once again, Scott Rick, thank you very much for coming.